through this development process and when they even get to construction. But it was more of just a comment in looking at the plan. Basketball courts, I love basketball, I like playing it myself, but when I'm looking at a community park like this, I'm trying to weigh the needs and stuff we don't have in Alpine. We've got 8 basketball courts over at Joe McQueen. They're open to the public except for during school hours. And basketball is a sport you can play with a pickup hoop in your driveway. So I'd like to see that reimagined into some type of hard court space, whether it be a tennis court, which we don't really have public tennis courts. And although I wasn't aware of the sport of pickleball, all the feedback I've gotten from people who utilize that at other county parks throughout the area is it's a growing sport and one that's utilized by demographics that we have in Alpine. And then the last major one, one of the biggest concerns is the safety to and from the park, and I believe traffic calming measures along South Grade Road are necessary. I mentioned at the January 14th meeting that the county parks hosted, there's been 2 fatalities directly in front of my house. I know a number of people have been more fatalities, and I'm aware of those. One, immediately at the entrance of the proposed park. I know it's not a Parks and Rec issue. It would be something that Department of Public Works would take up, but I think it's almost critical that if this park is developed as planned, that there are always stops at both entrances to the park. I think it's necessary. I think it's an existing safety issue, and I think it's something we had in our community plan update, like guiding principles and goals, was to find traffic calming measures for South Grade Road. With that, only one thing I want to say is I want to make clear there's a couple things. I fully appreciate the feedback we received tonight and over the last month or a month and a half. The planning group has, as is elected officials of Alpine, for planning purposes, a number of us have been very active in our time on this group and in this community searching for parkland. One of our past members, Linda Archer's husband, Jim Archer, and I think developed a friendship over a number of years, really working to find parkland for Alpine. It has been a difficult process. I've seen different reports that there's plenty of sites out there. I don't think that's accurate. I can attest that most of those sites have either been approached and they're not willing sellers, or their prices are unreasonable, and or they don't have ingress, egress, or access to the site. And so for me, I think I can't ignore the need for parks and active parks in our community. I think they benefit the whole community. And for me, I fully understand, in a perfect world, this would be located right in the middle of our town, or right on Alpine Boulevard, maybe right next door to the library. That land doesn't exist. What did exist was 15 acres that we worked to get donated or offered for donation to the county, but access didn't exist, and the residents in that neighborhood were very opposed to it. And so this park's going to be right across the street from my house. I will feel the impacts of traffic. I think some of the issues as far as loitering and other issues might be exaggerated based on the location of the park, but I'd be a hypocrite to say that just because it's close to my house and I'm going to face some of those negative impacts that I'd be opposed to it. That being said, I fully understand there will be development aspects of this park for some people that'd be hard to mitigate. But I think as public policy and planners, we have to evaluate the overall pros and cons of any development project and what they bring to the community. So the last thing on as far as like park sites, I've seen, why don't we build it where Lazy A is? Because Grossmont Union High School District owns that land, and they used eminent domain to take it, and they use it for educational uses, farming, because if they don't, they could be sued. They're not willing sellers. I get it. it just makes sense, right? We look at government and we say, wait, this is one part of our government. Why can't they swap lands? That's not reality, so I don't want to like dwell on that. The other is Alpine Elementary, and I'd say as I sit on the school board, again, that school board has responsibility as fiduciary interest to the community to get highest and best use for any site, even if it wasn't used as a school, which I hope to see it used one day again at some point. But again, the financial realities are the county probably would not have been able to afford to purchase that site, and they moved forward and purchased this site. I think to me, and I live across from Wrights Field, I walk in Wrights Field, I walked there this weekend with my kids. The majority of Wrights Field will go untouched. This park will, or the purchase of the land that the county did preserves an additional 70 plus acres of it. I'm walking Wrights Field. In reality, a lot of the hiking through Wrights Field, you don't see this property. It doesn't affect any existing trails. So I'm in favor of the park. I think there are some design elements that I'd like to make recommendations on. So with that, I'll go ahead and just get my attention if you want to speak, and I can come to you.
Yes, I'd like to speak on this one.
I'll come to you, Mike, and then I'll come to Jennifer. I'm going to work my way around then Al. So I'm going to start with you, Jim.
I'm going to give an observation at this point before I go any further. And the observation is that out of 17,000 people in Alpine, we've got 35 responses to this issue. That concerns me seriously. The people of Alpine are not speaking to this issue. A few people are speaking to this issue. It concerns me greatly. That's it.
Mike Milligan, I'm going to come to you, then Jennifer, then Al.
Yeah, first of all, I want to go back to what you talked about, to start it off with the barbecue area. I would agree with that. That could be somewhat hazardous. So I would say we have to do that relatively guarded if it was approved. The garden area, I've been a long time Alpine resident, and I had to put in a greenhouse because the varmints got after everything we ever tried to grow. The concept plan, I'm sure this is a concept plan, but I also know that when we were talking about this project some time ago, in fact, it's been going on, and I've been on the planning board for some time, I know the last go around, we were talking about a Joe McQueen school to develop that, and we were going to get some PTO funds, and we also had the backing of Diane Jacobs on this project, and that kind of went by the wayside. But when I look at the concept plan of this park, I don't see enough soccer field there. Soccer is a big thing in Alpine, and I don't think that there was enough fields there on that overall concept plan when I was looking at it. So I think that has to be addressed as a relatively big issue. Pickleball, I don't know that much about pickleball, and I don't really have that much one way or another. I am concerned about the safety issue of the kids getting to and from Alpine. I know, again, being on the planning board, when we had children walking to Joe McQueen School, we were trying to get some K-rails along South Grade to protect the kids. That never occurred. We've been talking about this for a long time. We've been talking about traffic control on South Grade because it was a big problem for the children being picked up and dropped off. This is not going to change. It's going to get worse if this park goes forward. I think the park has a lot of possibilities, but I'm looking at some of the negative comments that we received as we've been sitting here, and I think we need to look at the negative comments that people make because they're having an interest. There's a lot of people that are not taking any interest, which is kind of normal. Being on the planning board, we see that all the time. There's the people that usually speak up are the ones that are opposed to a program like this. So I really think that this should be up for probably some more review for the residents of Alpine to put in their feedback. And I'm also very concerned about the amount of water it's going to take to make this work, and where's the money coming from to make this park go together. I mean, we were problems when we were talking about developing the project over there at Joe McQueen. Where were we gonna get the water? How were we gonna water those fields if we put in grass? Then we were going to synthetic turf, and we got all kinds of negatives about synthetic turf because of the kids getting hurt on that stuff. I just feel as though this project, sorry for my coughing, I just think that this project needs to have further review before we bring it before a vote before this group. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Jennifer.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Travis. I have lived in Alpine, I would say, 98% of my life, other than college. And I have seen so many changes up here. I've been a kid here myself. I raised both my kids here. They went through the school system here. They went through AYSO here. Well, one of them did. I understand kids needing an active place to be. I understand kids needing somewhere to go. When you live up here in Alpine and you're not 16 and you can't drive, what do? There's a group of kids all the time on South Grade and Foss on their bikes. And it scares me to death because they have nowhere else to go. I used to go down Arnold Way on a skateboard. Like, I get that. And I understand that that's very much a need in our community. And for that reason, I am very torn because I also look at this park and I think that it looks like a park I would find in Carlsbad or Forest Ranch or Rancho San Diego, which are all very beautiful, but they're also very in the city. They're very master planned, something that the Irvine community would have come up with when they built their 300 homes with their little perfect park in the middle of it, which is beautiful, but I don't think that's Alpine. And I think that goes to the active passive argument, to all the comments that we're hearing from people saying this is not what our community wants here at Wrights Field. It's a wonderful design. It's a beautiful park. To the county's, credit, I think they tried to just incorporate as much as they could. I really feel it's too big for the location. I understand it's the only location it can be. Travis, I know how hard you guys look. I'm all for the location. With traffic calming on South Grade, because I also live on South Grade. And I think, God, I can't even imagine 250 parking spots. They think that there's going to be 1,000 cars a day coming to that park. It's just, the scope of it is overwhelming to me. And I think I hear a lot of people saying that same thing. So maybe there's some other middle ground, like Mike said. Let's reconsider. We're so close. I know there's something we can find that will meet the needs of the community without making it look like it should be in the middle of some master planned community somewhere. So traffic, parking, the kids. I would say just a couple of specific points. I actually like the basketball courts. There's no way I can have a pickup game in my house. I can't even walk to my neighbors from my house. So if we want to do it, we have to go somewhere. I agree, absolutely no barbecue pits. Obvious. And the water concerns me. There's a lot of grass in that park. Where would we get the water for that? So anyway, that's my concerns, and I think I wouldn't be able to vote to move forward as is, but I think we're close, and I think we can find some middle ground.
Al Hagen?
Thank you. Where I didn't know much about the liquor stuff, I consider myself an expert in parks and recreation. I've spent over 40 years as a playground director on a governing board of a park or recreation district somewhere. And one of the things that we have going here is that when I was superintendent of the schools 40 years ago, I worked with the county to get a park. And we had everything done, and then for some weird reasons, the owner of the land was killed in the PSA crash, and then on it went downhill. So we didn't get a park. The county had a policy then that they do not operate a park, but they will buy it if you can find somebody to operate it. And over the years, we've made the schools put grass there so we could actually have a place that resembles a park, but they're pretty limited in terms of the number of alternatives of what you can do there. And there's a lot of talk about losing open space and impact on Rice Field. Well, Rice Field's not at all. There's no land from Rice Field that's being taken away. They still have their 300 acres, and the 97 acres that we have that's not, whatever part of it's not being used for the park, think of it as an addition to Rice Field for purposes of use. I think that in all cases, whenever something like this comes up, people always find some reason to oppose it. Maybe they live too close, or it's the wrong thing that they would prefer to be something else. You know, instead of basketball courts, you ought to have volleyball courts, or you know, whatever. The comments made, a lot of them said, it's just in the wrong place. It ought to be somewhere else. I can tell you, in the last 40 years, we haven't been able to find another site for a park. This is the best alternative that we have in Alpine, because we don't have really any choices with the terrain we have. And as I look at this park, I'm astounded at how well designed it is. But you have to look at, if you're looking at the big picture, is what appeal does it have to the number of people, the broad appeal of the many uses they have. I think they've worked on so many different uses into it, and I think they're well distributed and kind of separated from the other parts of the park. And I think that it's just, if you look at the design and say, you know, how many different activities can we put on our area? Now, there's been complaints about the size of it being 28 acres. But one of the things that they have is that it is 28 acres because that's what it takes to accommodate all the uses they put on it. If you cut it in half, we'd cut the number of uses in half. And Alpine really needs a park. As I started to say, the county used to buy the land if you could find somebody, some group to run it. But what kind of groups are there? We talked about the community center over the years, taking over parks. It's a 501c3 organization, and 501c3s are really, you know, very valuable, but often they don't have a long-term possibility of going on for 50 years to run a park. And the county just changed their policy 2-3 years ago to say that they would actually run and operate the park. And so at the county park, some of the comments were, you know, we can't afford it here in Alpine. Well, we'll afford it as part of our participation in the county. So I, for all those reasons, I'm very much in favor of the park and will vote for it.
Yes, I'm getting the feeling that there's a mixed direction that we want to go. I don't know if it's out of order, but perhaps we should get together with another meeting and revisit this park. I don't know whether that's a viable option or not, but I'm feeling there's a lot of controversy here, and from my point of view, I would feel comfortable that we have another meeting or two, as we have in the past. I don't know whether the county's agreeable to that. I don't know whether the planning group's agreeable to that, but I'm offering my thoughts.
Can I make a comment, Jim? Because I'm in accordance with you. Because there was a lot of unanswered questions this evening that were brought up from the folks in the audience or the panelists, whatever. And I don't think they've been I don't think they've been answered. We've been talking about water, we've been talking about sewage disposal, and we've been talking about safety to get to the park and from the park. I don't think we have enough input from the community to make good decisions for the community. I'd like to table this to another meeting, or just table it for now and get more input from the county to see if they can answer the questions that were posed to us this evening by the folks that have been listening to our group meeting. These have not been answered, and from what I'm gathering from the comments, they got shined on. In other words, the park people never did tell the people what's going on. They haven't told us how the water's going to be handled for this, how the sewer is going to be handled for this, how are we going to get circulation to and from this park. I'm all for a park. We've been trying to get a park at Alpine for, what, 20 years? Probably more? I mean, I've been on the board for quite a while, and I know as far as trying to find a place to build one. I know Glenda and Jim Archer were beside themselves trying to find a place that we could actually build a park that would be suitable for everybody in Alpine. So I really think that I would like to make a motion to table this till we have more input from the county and for another meeting and get more input from the people in Alpine. Now, I know when we get panelists answering questions or giving us support, you're going to say just like Al did, you're mostly going to get negative. But we don't know how many positives. So we got to weigh the positive and negatives to see that we make the right decisions. I know, for instance, we tried on this 38-unit apartment complex in Alpine. We put a lot of effort into that, and we didn't say no just because we didn't like the people that were bringing the project to us. We said no because we had some tremendous safety issues. So we have the best interests of Alpine at heart. This whole committee does. So I hope the residents of Alpine realize what we try to do for the citizens of Alpine and for ourselves. I like to wake up in the morning and not feel guilty that I made a bad decision when it comes to the people of Alpine. So anyway.
I second your motion, Mike.
Thank you.
Point of order, Jim. Got a motion on the floor, and we can. I want to go through all the discussion, and then we'll decide if we pull that motion, right? Kippy. Actually, I'll go to George, and then I can come back to Kippy. George, you're muted. George, you're muted.
Yeah, my wife probably muted me. I made a point of going through and reading all the comments that people put up on the chat and the question and answers, and it kind of boiled into two bottoms for me. One of them is environmental impact, and I'm I have my own views on that, but I guess what I'm thinking of, Lori Bradley, you know, how far away are we from a final EIR or whatever document that we have? Because I think then we can definitively answer the kinds of environmental concerns people have. The other aspect is, and just seconding Jim and Mike on this, is that you can have the view where a project in itself does not appear to impact the roadways, but the roadways never get looked at in detail. And I know in some part, an environmental review is supposed to include traffic and pedestrian traffic and so forth. And the DPW and our planning and traffic engineers, I think it'd be good for somebody from the county to come back with its resources and address the repeated concern over and over about traffic and about kids. So I see that a little bit different than maybe perhaps other people do. The other thing that's kind of interesting is again, and you know, for disclosure of everybody, I'm with the Backcountry Land Trust, but this area that we're talking about is roughly 380 acres. The land trust owns some, a private developer owns some, the county owns some. The private developer we're negotiating with to conserve that property. The county wants to conserve the balance of its property not used for the park. And that would kind of indicate that 25 acres out of 300 acres of open space would be this park. So I'm kind of thinking 6 or 7% of the whole area. That I'm comfortable with that personally. So it's not, I'm sure it's just not going to damage the whole rest of the 380 acres. But that gets back again, Lori Bradley, these things are going to be examined in quite some detail on your environmental studies. And until you guys are through it enough with Wildlife Agency input enough, I understand you can't factually explain what these impacts might be. So I'm kind of inclined to like the idea of having another round of discussions, at which time the county can come back, traffic safety and environmental impact. Other than that, we came up here looking for a park. Our youngest son was in school. His youngest son's now getting ready to graduate from high school. So we really need to have something for kids in this town. But again, what are the real economic impacts? That's still coming. What are the real traffic and safety impacts? That's still coming. So I'm kind of in favor of deferring the approval and having another go and look at this stuff.
Linda?
I agree. They're putting way too many things in there. I'm definitely against the barbecue pits. I think the garden is a nice idea, but I don't think that's part of it there. We do have tennis courts. If you belong to the community center, you can use that tennis court. We have basketball courts already. I really think, like everyone said, they're putting way too much in there, and we really need to get back with them and find out about the concerns we have and our county has for safety and the water, everything else. So I agree with tabling this until we can get more answers.
Oh, sorry, Leslie.
I'm sorry, just to jump. I think Kippy was first. If you want to go first, Kippy, I'll go after you.
Kippy. I can't hear you, Kippy.
Turn your mic on.
Microphone. Oh,
You're muted, Kip.
You're still not on.
Is Kippy there?
Travis, you're off.
The same thing. Let's go to Leslie real quick. Well,
yes.
Kippy, you
Thank you.
might need to log back in. I'm not sure why Kippy's isn't. Your mic's not working. So go ahead, Leslie.
Thank you. I am in agreement as well that I think we need more time. I do think we need to have another meeting. I'm concerned with the perception of the community about our position that we're not listening. you know, there are some that feel we don't have the Alpine community's best interest at heart, which I know that we all do. I am strongly opposed to our benefits. Third, that would even be at all on any county proposed park in our little town of Alpine that suffers terribly from fire. My goodness, the cedar fire alone should be proof enough that that would be a safety hazard. I mean, at the least. So I really feel we need more time. We have to wait for the EIR anyway, and I think it's really important that we try our best to have more opportunities for the public to speak and feel that they're being heard. So that's my position.
And Kippy, you want to try one more time? No, I can't hear you. So, I think, unless Kippy, unless you want to try to call in. With that, I'll go ahead. He's not muted. It's an issue with his mic. So, with that, I'll go ahead and I'll pull back my motion. I wanted to encourage discussion. I think there's a couple things. One, I think the county released today 11-page frequently asked questions. I think they addressed a number of the questions that have come up, but not all. Some of them specifically to water. There's still it's kind of a to be determined at this point. And so I think the comments of the group are well founded. I mean, obviously, I think that it's important that there's at the very least, obviously, ample opportunity for the community to weigh in on this. I think the county has done. Again, I've said it before. They had public meetings. I attended those public meetings. There are certain aspects that people lobbied for or wanted that I had no interest in. I think that park looks amazing, and I think I'd break my leg if I tried it. I never really saw the need for. I don't have a personal need for a number of the aspects of the park, but I'd be lying if I said when we were at those meetings that the public was that there were people there who asked for it. I never had an interest in a skate park, but I've heard a number of parents say we need a skate park up here. And so I think that the challenging thing is I feel like some of the comments are focused on that we should do it somewhere else. I understand that thrust. I also understand I'm not really comfortable being an elected official and basically saying, hey, another 10 years can go by and another generation grows up without parkland up here. And I think the passive uses of Wrights Field, there's a lot of benefits of that, but it's not the same thing as an active.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think I can hear you now, Kippy. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull my motion, but let's go ahead and Kippy, you can give us your feedback.
Okay, I'm concerned about the
second as well.
Thank you, Jim. Go ahead, Kippy.
I'm concerned about, I didn't see any curb gutter sidewalks on South Grade Road. I saw no turn pockets getting in and out of the parks, no road improvements. That was one concern. Don't want anybody getting run over, getting in and out of the park or walking around the park. I'm concerned about is it turf or is it grass going in? That's another concern. Things like that. That portion of the land is not being used per se from hiking or anything in that area. So that's a good area for the park, in my opinion. Other than that, we've been looking for a park a long time, and there's a spot to have one. That's about the end of my comment.
Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, we have a new motion and a second to that motion. Can we call for the question or not?
I'd like to get real quick because I got to record it. Who's made the motion?
Michael did.
So
I think I made the motion to table this.
Okay.
And I seconded it.
I'm
And
gonna
Jim
rely
seconded it.
my vice chair and my parliamentarian. My understanding was we had a motion on the floor, and until we dismissed it, we didn't have any new motions. And so I got a motion by Mike, Jim Easterling second, and that is to table this for further discussion. The only discussion again, I'll send it out to the group. I'll send it out to the community, and I know Judy will reach out to those stakeholders that will reach out to her. I'd encourage everybody to visit the frequently asked questions. I think we want to start getting some of these answers down in writing so we can consider them, and we can come back and make a recommendation.
Do you need a roll call vote?
No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 9-0. All right.
Now, is there any way we can get some input from the county on these questions that I brought up, Jim brought up?
You know what, Mike? Like I said, I'll send it out afterwards. This just came out today. They did release a Q&A page. They've addressed a number of these things. In all fairness, like sewer, I don't think is they're kind of trying to plan based on 2 ADA accessible restrooms. What type of uses? They have a number of different options. Obviously, I think water's a big concern, and they don't have an answer to.
And the turf, what are we going to do for grass?
It's the plan or the concept was grass for the fields in the middle of the park and artificial turf for the baseball field. So
I didn't see any soccer fields, and I really feels very strongly about that.
and I think I think this would be important to have another meeting on it. The middle fields, which are open for community uses, whether it be a community fair, recreation, they kind of on the concept plans have faintly drawn lines where they could be chalked, obviously for like in the fall for soccer on Saturdays, stuff like that. So they had room for some additional soccer fields. And then I'll bring up to, you brought it up, and just so it's a tangent, the project at Joe McQueen is not dead. It just takes a lot to process the project outside of where the county's processing it on their own terms. So the school district has developed fully approved Department of State architecture plans. Our former supervisor dedicated some neighborhood reinvestment funds to the project, and we're going to hopefully be bringing to the Board of Supervisors sometime this year the proposal for the planning and development ordinance funds that the group voted on in the past to support a multi-use soccer, football, lacrosse field at Joe McQueen. And I think that, at least for one ending comment, I think that was one of the reasons some of these initial meetings, personally, I felt like, hey, we have some field improvements going on at Joe McQueen, and so there's no reason to lobby for those here at this park when, you know, we're going to be having some active fields at the other. I think again they've kind of used some multi-use in the way they've designed the park, so there could be some field usage, but it wasn't a focal point. So we talked this one to death. It's 8:52. Our normally scheduled ending's 9 o'clock. We can vote to extend it by 30 minutes. I'm going to say very clearly that item number 3 is not an item that we'll probably get through in 8 minutes or 38 minutes. And I have Rob Eford, Tara, Bianca, Donna here on behalf of the county. And actually, before we leave, Judy, Johanna, Crystal, Lori, thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate your participation and your work on behalf of the community throughout this. So you guys can end your night unless you want to stick around for the end.